Hey everyone, thank you for joining the webinar. We're about a minute early here, so we're just going to give it a few minutes for people to keep hopping on in, and we'll start about 2 minutes after the half hour here. So just give us a few moments, and we'll go ahead and get kicked off. But thanks for joining. Maybe as we're kind of waiting, it'd be awesome if people could maybe drop in the chat where they're calling in from. I'm calling in from Washington, D.C. My name is Shashank. I'm on the product marketing side, and I believe James is going to give us a solid example here of where he's hopping in from.
Indeed, here from the UK, here from London.
We got some Netherlands in the house. From Romania, nice.
Very nice, Cedric. Lots of our engineering team are from France.
Cool. I see more people hopping in. We're just going to give it a minute here, and then we'll go ahead and get kicked off. Cool. We're at 2 after the start time, so we'll go ahead and get kicked off here. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm really excited for the presentation and the content we have. So excited to go through some of our biggest releases over the last quarter, specifically as it pertains to security, and kind of give you a bit of a preview about what's to come out in Conduktor as well. Excited for James to be presenting here. Before we get kicked off with the content, if you go to the next slide, James, a few house rules to keep in mind. There's tons of different ways to engage. Try to keep this interactive. Try to keep this bi-directional. If there's anything you see that you have an emotion to, feel free to react using the emoji. There's a couple of other ways that we can kind of interact here. If you have any comments, please use the chat button that's all the way to the right. If you have any questions, please use the questions tab. It's much easier for us to keep track of all of the questions that are flowing in and keep them tidy in that questions tab versus the chat. So keep comments to chat, keep questions to questions, and we'll make sure to go through them. And just as a heads up, we'll try to answer questions as they're coming in. We have a few folks from Conduktor answering questions, but if there's anything that we can't answer immediately, we'll kind of save those for the Q&A at the end, and then you'll have an opportunity to put in new questions as well. And then finally, we have the polls feature, which kind of lets us get an idea of the crowd. So one question that I'm going to drop in really quick is, what stage are you at in your data streaming journey? So just publish that. So feel free to start answering that, so we get an idea of who's in the crowd and where in your Kafka journey you're at. So. With that, I will hand it over to James to get kicked off on the content.
Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining today. If I haven't met you before, I'm James. I'm a product director at Conduktor. I've been here developing developer tools for Kafka for about 1.5 years now. And prior to that, about 5-6 years building data products. So super excited to walk through what Conduktor have been working on recently this year, tease a bit of what's to come with our core product, the console, and also we'll give a bit of an insight into our new product, Conduktor Gateway, and exactly what that can enable for you. So if you're not familiar with Conduktor, just to give you a brief overview of who we are and what we do, essentially we're here to help developers and engineering teams. Shashank, I think you've gone big screen again. Help developer teams and engineering teams overcome and harness the complexities of real-time data streaming. We do that not only through the tooling that we provide to enable teams that are operating on Kafka, but also through partnerships due to the wealth of experience of working with Kafka within the Conduktor teams. A few numbers. So we've been trusted by over 15,000 companies now. We've been used by over 100,000 developers, massively due to the huge successes of Conduktor, the desktop application, which you may know from the last few years. And here's a really nice quote from one of our partners, Rare at OpenTag, who very elegantly puts how Conduktor helps their engineers all the way through their data streaming journey, being it building, operating, diagnosing, and extending their Kafka-based workloads. So what we're going to cover today, a little bit about the Conduktor console. Some of you may already be familiar with it. If not, I'll do a quick demo. We'll put that to a case study, and we'll see how that really can help developers who are operating with Kafka and really enable those teams of engineers. And then afterwards, we'll take a look at the Conduktor Gateway, which you may be less familiar with. Really, we'll look at this as the other side of how you developing on Kafka, and really this focuses on kind of applications that are interacting with Kafka rather than users themselves. Hopefully, we'll have a bit of time for Q&A at the end, but in the meantime, feel free to post things in the chat, as Shashank alluded to. So a quick recap on the Conduktor console. If you're not familiar with what it is, then you'll see some screenshots on the side. But the Conduktor console is our unified interface for Kafka. It really focuses on the developer experience and providing developer autonomy. And we do that by providing all of the necessary enterprise controls that you need to have to be able to create a secure and governed area for your developers to do what they need to be able to do. One of the key pillars in this is being able to visualize the information inside your Kafka, be it the data, be it the configurations, for things such as your topics, your subjects in your schema registry, your consumer groups, your ACLs, and Kafka Connect. And you can do this all in one really simple, really easy to use interface. And of course, you can collaborate with your team over it as well. The second pillar we're really focusing is troubleshooting. So being able to dive into a tool when you're in the middle of an incident, not bring up the CLI and start churning through data, but actually be able to visualize what's happening. We could do that. We offer that through continuous monitoring of your brokers and also your streaming applications. So how are they performing? What does your consumer lag look like? And of course, inside the console, we have advanced filtering techniques that allow you to kind of deep dive and drill down into the data in your topics as well. Third pillar that we think about when we use the Conduktor console is operate. So what are those Kafka operations that we need to automate? Things such as managing your consumer groups, reprocessing messages, for example, a poison pill, and updating your schemas, checking compatibility, restarting tasks inside Kafka Connect. All of these operations, things you might be doing without a tool like Conduktor, you can do all of that in a kind of point and click way inside the console. And lastly, how do we put an enterprise wrap around that? How do we ensure that great developer experience, but then we also provide or we respond to the needs of the modern enterprise. And we're obviously talking about security and governance here. So we provide all of that wrapped up with role-based access control and additional features such as data masking and the ability to audit who did what and when, so that you have full confidence in what's going on inside your Kafka infrastructure. So I thought the best way to look at a quick demo and do a quick tour of the console was to look at a common case study. How do we provide developer autonomy while also adhere to that organization's security and the governance needs? So we're going to look at two personas. We've got Alice, who is a software engineer. Alice needs visibility on the shape of her Kafka data so that she can develop her applications and features with confidence. And she often needs to reconcile data in Kafka with data in an external system, for example, a database. When incidents occur, she may need to find a needle in a haystack before triggering action. So this is Alice, but on the other side, we've got Bob. Bob is a platform administrator or an ops person, and Bob obviously has a different set of needs. Bob needs to ensure that security and compliance is met, and therefore needs the tools like field masking, granular permissions to be able to do that. And finally, Bob must be able to control access to a multitude of environments, clusters, and Kafka resources. He needs visibility of who did what inside different parts of the Kafka infrastructure. So we're going to look at a demo. And in this demo, we'll demonstrate how easy it is to construct an environment that satisfies both Bob and Alice's needs. We'll also touch on a few new features that we added in 2023. So I'm just going to come outside for a moment. Can you see my screen? Hopefully you can. So we're inside the console. So first things first, we're logged in as Bob, and Bob needs to ensure that the environment is appropriately governed. So how do we do that? We need to make sure first that our environment is set up for all of our users. So first things first, we'll have a quick look at the shape of the data in Kafka. So as you can see, we've got a couple of different Kafka clusters configured, and I'm going to have a quick look into the production cluster. As you can see, we've got a few different topics. We've got them tagged with some nice metadata, and we can see we've got some pizza data here, as well as what looks like some more sensitive data, which might have some PII information in it. In this case, that's the user's registrations topic. Here you can see we have some PII data inside our Kafka topics, such as customers' names. So I just wanted to give you a shape of the data before having a look inside the admin portal. So now I need to set up my environment for my users. I want to make sure that when Alice joins, that she's got the right level of access so that she can operate as she should be able to. So instead of inviting a member, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new group. This group is going to be for my engineering team. The nice thing about Conduktor is I've got it configured to my SSO, my identity provider. So I've got this configured to Azure, and that means that I can use a new feature that we released this year called external group mapping. So essentially, I have a source of truth for my external groups in Azure. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to bring my users in with those external groups. And when they log in, ensure that they have the appropriate permissions that I've set inside Conduktor for the engineering team. So I'm going to create this external group. And now I've created that external group, I'm going to manage some permissions for them. So I'm going to assign some permissions, but the first thing I need to do is check that RBAC is enabled. Now that it's enabled, I can assign some permissions for my engineering group. So today we have two roles, the editor and the viewer role. So for the editor, this is essentially read-write permissions on Kafka resources that we provide it. Whereas for the viewer, essentially these are read-only permissions. We're going to talk a bit about how to go to another level of granularity later, but for now, we're going to focus on this. So I want my engineering team to have full edit permissions on topics in my staging cluster. And actually, I'm going to give them full edit permissions on subjects and consumer groups and all of those things inside staging. Because to be honest, my staging environment doesn't actually contain any sensitive data, and therefore I don't have a problem with that. It's all dummy data in staging. We have no problem with giving engineering team permissions for that. However, for my production cluster, you saw earlier that I have a users registrations topic, and that registrations topic essentially has some PII data in it that I want to be really careful on. So for my production cluster, I'm going to set permissions for my engineering team that they should only have read-only permissions in anything that's prefixed with a user. And I'm going to hit save. But before I let my engineering team come and do what they need to do inside Conduktor, I'm going to do one additional thing, which is set a data masking rule. This allows me to go one step further than RBAC and actually create a field level masking policy, which is necessary for that production topic that I've provided them read-only access. So I'm going to call this mask PII, and the information is critical. So for anything whereby we see the name field appear in any production topic prefixed with users, we're going to assign this policy. And if we want to exclude the user from a specific group, we can. In this case, I'm not going to, because I don't want anyone to see that sensitive data. So I'm going to go ahead. I've created that policy. As far as I'm concerned, as Bob, the administrator, my environment is ready. I'm ready to let the engineers rip on Conduktor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out as Bob. And as I said earlier, we've configured our environment with SSO, so I can sign in with Azure. And I'm going to impersonate Alice, who would be a developer or an engineer, and should be accessing that specific subset of information that we've set. So I'm going to dive back into the console. And as you can see, by default, we can only see one topic in the production cluster. That's because our RBAC rules are being applied, and Alice only has access to users.registrations. We can also see, if we dive into the topic, that our masking policy has been applied on the field name. So although I can access production to assist with a production incident that might be happening, I, one, can't see the sensitive data, and two, I should not be able to corrupt the data by, for example, producing a message into it. There we go. Fortunately, RBAC's working. Forbidden. I, as Alice, know that I can't mess up this production environment, but I have visibility into it to assist in those important investigations. While I'm here, let's dive back into the staging cluster. And as we can see, we have full access in staging, so we can give a bit of an overview into some of the other features in console. As a developer, I often need to find a needle in a haystack, and that might mean diving in here and applying a specific filter that would allow me to drill down to a specific message. So as an example here, we've got this order ID field, and we might need to filter on a specific message where the order ID equals this value. Oh, my bad. Okay, I've written a bad filter, bear with me. Five, 4, 6, 7, 8. I think was the value. I could be wrong. Phew. I can drill down, I can see this message, and then I can do what I need to do to rectify it. The other thing as a developer I might be interested in is my schema registry. Let's say I need to update the schema, then within the console, of course, I have that flexibility to do that. I can check the compatibility of a change. Likewise, if I look at my consumer groups, I can see that they are stable, and I can see that the overall lag, and I can see the topics associated with my consumer groups. Finally, in regards to Kafka Connect, I can see that I've got some connectors running. In this case, it looks like the Wikipedia SSE task has failed. So if I want to, I can restart that and get that running again. The last thing I'll touch upon is brokers. So I have visibility of my brokers, and I also have visibility of my ACLs, or actually in this case, it looks like I don't have permission within staging. So hopefully there was some interesting things there that sparked your interest. Feel free to shout them out in the chat if there was specific things that sparked your interest. The last thing that I will quickly touch upon is jumping into the monitoring. So I mentioned as a developer, I might not be so interested in the kind of operational monitoring that Bob might be interested in, which is this. Bob might be interested in my cluster health, and we look at kind of 5 key metrics there. Under replicated partitions, offline partitions, etc. But for Alice, you may be interested in application monitoring. So what we mean here is, are my consumer groups healthy? And if they are, what is the overall lag? And I can see that on a time series as well. So yeah, quick tour there into the Conduktor console. Hopefully that was interesting. And I will go back to the deck for now. So we touched a little bit on RBAC, which looked great, but it's getting better. So at the moment, as we alluded to, we only have those 2 roles, which were the editor and the viewer roles. But actually, we know that our customers want to go down to a much deeper level of granularity, which is what we're providing here. So as you can see, we're providing both service level access and resource level access, which is what we don't have today. So should I be able to manage certificates, for example? Should I be able to manage data masking policies, as well as having the topic and subject schema resource level access that we've touched upon in the demo? Data masking policies, I think we've touched upon there, so we won't drill into that in too much, but just a little bit on the external group sync. So we saw there, made it really easy to synchronize Conduktor's RBAC system with your LDAP or your OIDC source of truth. So essentially, we're making it very easily to integrate with them and then bring that external group membership, which I demonstrated in the demo. A little bit on what's coming up. So we've talked a bit about what's been delivered there, but like, what are customers asking for? What are we looking at in product to improve the experience and make it even better? The one thing that a lot of people have been asking for, obviously we're a new product, we've not been around for long, is the public Helm chart. So if you go to docs.conduktor.io now, you will be able to find a public Helm chart. That follows the Kubernetes controller pattern, which you may or may not be familiar with, but it's explained in the documentation. The other thing that we were initially trying to steer people against, because we believe from a security governance perspective, it's a tricky one, is data export. Initially, we said we want to keep the data in Conduktor rather than enable people to take it out. But it seems there are a lot of use cases, data scientists, analysts, where they need to pull things out and they need to do aggregate analysis. So we've decided that we will enable that feature, but we'll put it behind RBAC controls as well. Performance is a big one. We want to be the leader in this space, and therefore we're looking at some serious improvements to how we enable the metadata listing in all of the list screens that you've seen in the console. We'll be doing that through essentially caching our data and making it much more available within, particularly if you're using, huge volumes of data, you've got a very large schema registry, etc. Another one to enable more automation to happen outside the platform is public APIs. So we want to provide a REST API, and the initial focus that we're working on already is going to be around user, group, permission, and cluster management. Finally, the other thing that we're looking at is filters. So we've had a lot of experience that JavaScript filters are great, but they're not for everyone. Not everyone's comfortable using them. And for some things, they can actually be less simple than a really nice user experience for a simple filter. So expect that to come very soon as well. Great. So as Bill Murray said, Conduktor console solves how developers interact with Kafka, and we can put a tick next to that saying we're doing a good job here. But it has only been one piece of the puzzle in the grand scheme of things. Therefore, we want to solve the remaining piece, which is my applications. When you're using Conduktor, you're a user driving Kafka interactions, be it explorations, be it interactions. But actually, if you're using Kafka in production, then you've got applications that are interacting with Kafka. And so we're looking at opportunities to how we can help in this space as well. So introducing the Conduktor gateway. What is this? In a nutshell, what the gateway does is it enhances or improves Kafka or the native Kafka protocol with a layer that sits between your client requests and your Apache Kafka responses. I've got a bit of a diagram on the next page that we will come back to. But the thinking behind this is, while Kafka is immensely powerful as a distributed streaming platform, there are also some operational complexities that come through operating it. So you might be familiar with the challenges in solving kind of topic naming strategies and actually being able to enforce them. The mismanagement or the mismanagement of configurations, such as the number of partitions being used, for example, which can lead to big costs on precious resources, or incorrect retention policies being used. And obviously you have all of the things operationally that happen, like poison pills, where you have single problematic messages that could corrupt your entire system. So essentially, gateway is that man in the middle that sits between your client applications and your Kafka, and actually can intercept the traffic and can perform checks actually on both the business data and actually the configurations that are being proposed through it. It is Apache Kafka protocol compliant. It is working with all of the Kafka providers. So no matter who you're using, Confident, AWS, or Avon, we have a solution for you. And really, we look at kind of four key pillars for how we think this can help you. One can be around enforcing business rules, so giving you kind of like a layer without the need for a central governance team to enforce those rules and actually make them happen. We have application reliability, so we have solutions that enable you to simulate the chaos inside your application to understand how it responds to specific scenarios. We have end-to-end encryption, and actually this is the one I'm going to focus on for the purpose of my demo in a moment. And then we also have the reduced costs. So we have some approaches in there that can actually alleviate some of the costs that can come with some of those issues I mentioned earlier, such as mismanaging number of partitions and retention policies, etc. So if this sounds interesting, again, chuck things into the chat. We'll come back to it. We've got people on the call who can help out as well. So quick architecture diagram here to talk about end-to-end encryption. Of course, there are strategies available to encrypt data in Kafka today. You can enforce encryption at the application level. Obviously, that's quite difficult to ensure. It's as weak as the least informed engineer, for example. And it involves building encryption into all of your applications, which is obviously just a logistical situation. Or of course, you can encrypt the entire disk, but obviously Conduktor's solution to this is unique, thanks to being that kind of man in the middle between your applications and your Kafka, where it can act as a central point of governance or central point of enforcement. And we do support most popular KMS solutions as well, things like Vault and AWS KMS. So in this example, we've got gateway sitting between the applications and Kafka, and for the data in transit, or the data that's being emitted to the brokers, the gateway can use encryption and decryption. However, in the underlying Kafka, that data would be encrypted at rest. So we're going to try to demo this just very quickly now using the Conduktor console. So what we're going to demonstrate is I've already got my gateway environment configured on my machine. So we're not going to go through that today, but essentially that's configured to encrypt and decrypt the password and visa fields in my messages if I'm connected to the gateway. However, if we look at the backing Kafka behind that, which I'm also going to demonstrate, we'll be able to see that the data is encrypted at rest. The one really key thing here to remember is console is not doing the magic. Console is here to demonstrate the functionality of the gateway, which is essentially a backend solution. Let me just grab my screen. Okay, so I'm going to dive back into the console. And as you'll see earlier, from the very nice cluster identity selection, we have two clusters here. We have the gateway and we have the gateway backing cluster. So first things first, I'm going to dive into gateway. And actually, I'm going to sign back out and sign back in as Bob to do this. So give me one moment. Okay, so RBAC working as it was expected. But let's have a look at Bob. So Bob can obviously see the data inside the gateway configuration. What we can see here is we have one topic, and we're going to take a look at one of the messages, and we're just going to take that message email, and we're going to use it here. I'm going to create a new name to show that this is all happening in the moment. So James webinar and we've got two fields which we're expecting to be encrypted at rest. So I'm going to produce this message. And what you'll see if we just jump back into the gateway configuration is that our message is here, but the data is not encrypted, or it, in fact, is being decrypted as we fetch it. But if we switch to the underlying Kafka, the gateway backing cluster, what we're going to see is we do have that message, but both our password and our visa fields are now encrypted. So very, very seamlessly, without any involvement from the client, using that central gateway as essentially an operator to employ those encryption and those decryption rules, it's been completely seamless, and our data is now encrypted at rest. Now, if we had a multitude of client applications producing into Kafka, we could use this central point to enforce that layer of governance across all of them. So hopefully that sparked your interest into how powerful this can be. And the exciting news is that while we focused on just encryption for the purpose of the demo, that was really the tip of the iceberg. And what we mean by that is that was just one example of an interceptor, which is essentially a plugin, let's say, for gateway, that we're making available to essentially enhance that native Kafka functionality. So a couple of other examples, which we won't have time to dive into today, are around safeguard. Really, the point of that is to essentially safeguard through employing business rules on Kafka. So that could be a topic naming strategy. It could be about mismanaging the number of managing the number of partitions. We have chaos, which I alluded to earlier, which is all about kind of simulating that chaos in your environment. And then we have other things like audit and cold storage, offloading large files into S3. But as I said, really, we've just given you a flavor today. The gateway is available open source today. So if you want to go to that GitHub repository, start to build, customize, etc., then obviously you have that flexibility. We also have an enterprise version of this, of course, with enterprise features. On the right, you'll see there is a marketplace coming. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, this will be publicly available. But that is pretty much everything we were going to go through today. So I've not been following the chat or the questions, so I apologize, but happy to come back to them, revisit them, and see if we can dig into any of them now.
Cool. Thanks, James. It looks like we have most of the questions in the Q&A already answered. Maybe this is one we can answer live, actually. Conduktor Ratode asked, I'd be interested in data governance compliance using some kind of standard regulatory PII hashing on topics. Is this something you have planned in the future roadmap?
Yeah, and I can see Florence alluded to that already, but I think Gateway's it's an absolutely perfect solution for this. So he's alluded to some of what we were describing as interceptors there. So encryption, audit, RBAC, data masking, a lot of the things you found in the console, which really are there for the users, you have all of that, but you have it for your applications and as well. So yeah.
Got it. Yeah, and for anyone else that's still on the call, if you have any questions, start popping them into the Q&A, and we'll kind of run through those with James here.
Cool. So I
think that was
a question, just for anyone who can't see them, alluded to the performance impact of introducing the gateway. Very expected question to receive, and Florent, again, he's added the rule of thumb there is around 2 milliseconds. if you add encryption with wild encryption. So there's a specific example there. I'm sure if you needed more Atomos, we could reach out with some benchmarks, etc. if you want a bit more detail.
Yep. And I think the latest one from Daniela here is where can we visualize the logs in the console in case something goes wrong in the communication? And yeah, I think Florent answered that question, but I think maybe another option would be the audit log feature within console. Is that right, James?
Yeah, so just to bring it up briefly, because we didn't actually dive into it. So here's the audit log. It's actually the latest version, which hasn't been pushed quite into production yet. But you've got this audit log. It may not be exactly what you're asking for, Daniela, that it has visibility of the who did what and when. So in this case, we can see that Yam browsed the topic on connect configs on Julian's Cloud Kafka. So actually, if you click into that, you're going to get a really good visibility of some of the additional metadata associated with the event.
Perfect. So we have something in the chat. Daniela with some thumbs up. Thank you, Daniela. Yep. If any more questions, this is the opportunity. We'll be looking out in both the chat and the questions tab if there's anything. James, nice job. You're getting a lot of nice thumbs up here.
Well, 2 successful demos is fortunate in something like this, so I'm reasonably happy with that. But yeah, Florence dropped his personal email there for a 1-1 with Gateway to show off some of the other features. I'm sure everyone at Conduktor would be super keen to do that. So thank you everyone for joining. Feel free to reach out via LinkedIn if you want to chat anytime. And we'll also be at the Kafka Summit. So if any of you are going to be there, then please do stop by and come and have a chat.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you all hopping on. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.